There are differences between a psychopath and a sociopath. Clear, sharp, deadly differences. But most men walk blindly into their traps, thinking they're dealing with one, when it's the other who destroys them. And by the time you realize which mask you're staring at, it's already too late. Machiavelli would have warned you, misjudging your enemy is not just ignorance, it is fatal. Power lies in clarity, survival demands it. So listen closely, because if you still believe these two are just types of manipulators, you've already made your first mistake. The psychopath doesn't lose control, he never raises his voice. He doesn't need to. While the sociopath shouts, threatens, breaks things in a storm of impulse, the psychopath smiles. He studies you while you speak, mirrors your emotions, and gains your trust. He is cold, but looks warm. He is empty, but speaks with feeling. And that's the trap. That is the mask of normalcy. A sociopath makes you flinch. A psychopath makes you open up. This is what most people never see. Sociopaths are obvious. They get angry fast. Their cruelty shows in bursts. You see it in their eyes when they snap. You feel the heat of their rage when something doesn't go their way. And because of that, you think you're safe. You think danger must always look like chaos. But the psychopath teaches you otherwise. He doesn't get angry, he studies your anger. He doesn't raise his tone, he calculates the exact tone that will disarm you. He uses charm as a weapon, empathy as bait, and silence as a net. He will talk about your childhood, remember your dog's name, and laugh at your jokes, not because he cares, but because he's preparing to use all of it. You are a file, a folder, a data point in his pursuit of power. That's what makes him dangerous. And Machiavelli, if he were here, would not waste time on the emotional theatrics of the sociopath. He would focus his attention on the mask, the one who never reveals his hand until your kingdom is already gone. Do not mistake stillness for goodness. The sociopath punches a wall when things fall apart. The psychopath invites you to dinner. The sociopath steals from you with anger. The psychopath lets you hand it over yourself. He makes you feel safe. This is the horror most victims describe. He seemed so normal. He was charming. I never thought he was capable of that. But the signs were always there. You just didn't see them. Why? Because the mask is designed to match your fantasy. The sociopath offends your instincts. The psychopath seduces them. You project decency onto him because you want to believe he's like you. But he isn't. He doesn't feel what you feel. He doesn't connect the way you connect. And the more you reveal, the more he uses it. Not immediately. Not recklessly. No, he waits. He weaves. He lets you believe you're winning. Then one day, everything is gone, and you don't even remember when it started. The world rewards masks. That's the deeper sickness. In politics, in corporations, in relationships, those who display control are handed power. And the psychopath thrives in that system. He has mastered the performance. While the sociopath burns bridges in the street, the psychopath is given the keys to the castle. He is the CEO, the lover, the trusted friend. He is the one you never thought to fear. But make no mistake, his mask is not who he is. It's who he designed to be. Every word, every gesture, every apology is a calculated move. He is not spontaneous. He is not passionate. He is precise. The sociopath destroys in broad daylight. The psychopath poisons the well, then watches from the shadows while others drink. And when they collapse, he steps forward with a hand on your shoulder and says, "I warned them. This is not fiction. This is not theory. This is real. And you've already met one." Most people won't accept this. They'll defend the charm. They'll say, "He's just misunderstood," or "He's had a tough past." And that's what the psychopath counts on. Your compassion, your need to believe in redemption, your desire to connect. Because all of that makes you predictable. And predictability is leverage. Understand this. The mask of normalcy is not a glitch, it's the entire game. And the better he wears it, the more you trust him. But if you start to ask the right questions, if you start to observe instead of project, you'll see the cracks. You'll notice the mimicked empathy, the rehearsed concern, the calculated pauses. And once you do, he knows. Because now you're no longer a tool, you're a threat. And that's when the real game begins. This is the first truth, the first fracture, the first crack in the illusion. You must stop confusing loud danger for real danger. You must learn to spot the quiet ones, the still ones, the ones who never lose their cool. Because that's where the power hides. In the mask, in the silence, in the man who seems too perfect to be real. That's who Machiavelli would study. That's who you must prepare for. And if you still believe that you can spot him with your gut, think again. Your gut is no match for someone who's studied yours longer than you've studied your own. But if that's the mask, what's behind it? What lies beneath a man who smiles without feeling, who mimics without connection, who never breaks because there is nothing inside to break? In the next part, you'll understand the second difference, the one that separates the man who feels nothing from the man who feels but ignores it. That distinction may be the only thing that saves you. He feels nothing. That's the second difference. Not less, not rarely, nothing. A psychopath doesn't suppress emotion, he lacks it. No remorse, no empathy, no guilt. When he hurts you, it doesn't register. Not because he's cold-hearted in the way a sociopath is, reactive, angry, drowning in his own mess, but because there's simply no conscience inside to trigger regret. It's not broken, it's absent, and that absence creates a vacuum, a space where strategy, advantage, and power can grow without interference. This is where the true danger begins. You're dealing with someone who isn't battling his darker nature. He's never had to. There is no internal resistance, no moral hesitation, and that is a kind of efficiency you're not prepared for. While you wrestle with right and wrong, he simply moves. The sociopath, on the other hand, does feel. He has a conscience, but he ignores it. He knows when he's gone too far. He just doesn't care. Sometimes he even apologizes, not because he means it, but because he remembers the social script. His emotions are unstable: rage, guilt, panic, regret. They come and go like weather. One moment, he's screaming. The next, he's crying. The next, he's begging. But don't confuse this for depth. It's chaos. And chaos can be dangerous, yes, but it's visible. You see, when a sociopath is spiraling, you feel the instability. It gives you a chance to brace, to respond, to defend. The psychopath never gives you that luxury. His emotions are not just buried, they are non-existent. He never flinches, never second-guesses, never wonders if he went too far. He calculates how far he can go and then steps just past it to test your boundaries. Machiavelli would say, "A man without conscience is a man unbound by the normal rules of war." And in life, everything is war. Relationships, business, politics. The man who feels nothing will always win in a system built on feelings. He won't hesitate, you will. He won't overthink, you will. He won't regret, you will. And that imbalance becomes leverage. You believe there are limits to what someone will do. He believes there are none. That's why psychopaths often rise. They don't get stuck in the emotional mud where most people collapse. They're not dragged down by guilt. They don't need to justify their actions to themselves. They just move forward, ruthlessly, strategically, without pause. While you're apologizing for a mistake, he's already positioned to exploit it. This is not just theory. It explains the quiet confidence you feel around these people, why they seem so composed, so clear, so unshakable. You mistake it for self-assurance, for maturity. But it's not growth, it's the absence of conflict. A psychopath has no civil war inside him. He is a single, focused weapon, no hesitation, no internal objections, no fear of hurting others. And when you meet him, when you feel that calm, you project goodness onto it. Because calm usually means control. But here's what Machiavelli would tell you. Calm in the wrong hands is more dangerous than rage. Rage is loud, predictable, but calm can be anything. It can be kindness, or it can be a blade. And if you mistake one for the other, you will not survive the first strike. But don't let this lead you into false comfort about the sociopath. Yes, he feels, but his feelings are weaponized too. When a sociopath explodes, it's not always a loss of control. It's often a tactic, intimidation, chaos, confusion. He knows how to use his volatility to scare you, manipulate you, pull you back in. He makes you feel like you're the crazy one. He accuses, yells, cries, threatens. But then when you leave, he begs. When you stop responding, he promises change. He knows he's gone too far, but he counts on your forgiveness. And you give it because you see his remorse. But what you're really seeing is rehearsal. His conscience is selective, temporary. It's there, but it's not in control. He feels the brake pedal, he just refuses to press it. And here's the Machiavellian truth. A man who ignores his conscience is only slightly less dangerous than a man who lacks one, because he knows what he's doing is wrong and chooses it anyway. That choice creates a different kind of fear. With the psychopath, you're prey. With the sociopath, you're a pawn in a game that keeps changing. The psychopath builds a strategy and sticks to it. The sociopath burns the plan, blames you, then rewrites the story. Both are threats. But only one can mimic empathy so perfectly, you'll hand him your secrets, your body, your loyalty. And when you do, he won't flinch. Not because he's strong, but because inside, he feels nothing at all. Now ask yourself, how many people have you trusted simply because they stayed calm? How many have you forgiven because they seemed sincere? And how many are still holding parts of your life, your story, your weaknesses, waiting for the right moment to use them? That's the true cost of not knowing the difference, of thinking your conscience is universal. It isn't. And every time you project it onto someone else, you're writing a permission slip for your own manipulation. But this is only the beginning. There's something even more dangerous than feeling nothing, and that's how these two move through the world, when rules are broken, when the stakes are high, when violence, emotional or real, is the next step. In the next part, you'll see exactly how each of them deals with risk, and why misjudging their response could be the last mistake you ever make. Risk exposes the soul. Show a man what he's willing to lose, and you'll see what governs him. For most people, risk triggers hesitation, fear, morality, but not in these two. The psychopath and the sociopath face risk differently, but both are willing to step over lines you didn't even know existed. And if you misread their reaction to danger, you will hand them your weaknesses without realizing it. Machiavelli knew this well. He said that fortune favors the bold, but only when the bold are calculated. And here lies the third critical difference. The sociopath is impulsive. He doesn't plan, he reacts. When challenged, he explodes. He yells, he lashes out without a second thought. The psychopath doesn't. He measures, he waits, he calculates the gain before making the move. One is a bomb, the other is a sniper. Sociopaths don't fear consequences until it's too late. Their risk tolerance is tied to emotion. When they feel disrespected, provoked, or exposed, they act usually in ways that destroy everything, including themselves. And because their emotions are unpredictable, so are their risks. They'll ruin their career, a relationship, a life, just to prove a point. It's not strategy, it's compulsion. They want you to feel what they feel, and they want it now. But the psychopath is a different animal entirely. He sees risk as a tool, a negotiation. He doesn't take it unless the payoff is worth it. He doesn't explode when insulted. He files it away. He smiles. He shakes your hand. And then months later, when you've forgotten all about it, he moves. And the move is clean, final, undeniable. You never see it coming, because unlike the sociopath, he doesn't announce his intentions. He executes them. This is what makes the psychopath so much more dangerous in the long term. He plays the long game. He'll lose small battles to win the war. He'll let you think you've won, that he's forgiven, that nothing is wrong, just to keep you close, just to watch, just to study how you bleed. He can wait years for the right moment. The sociopath can't wait 5 minutes, and that difference determines the damage they cause. Sociopaths leave wreckage in the moment, visible, dramatic, loud. Psychopaths leave none. Their damage is surgical. Reputations destroyed, empires taken, lives hollowed out. And when it's over, people say the same thing. He seemed so calm. That's not calm. That's weaponized patience. That's a man who has no conscience slowing him down and no emotion pushing him too fast. Just cold precision and relentless aim. And that's where most people get trapped. They confuse the sociopath's recklessness with danger and the psychopath's restraint with safety. But it's the opposite. The sociopath wants to win now. He's loud, messy, emotional. The psychopath wants to own the board forever. He's quiet, methodical, and entirely unemotional about what has to be done. He sees you crying and doesn't flinch. He sees you pleading and doesn't blink. He will destroy you if it makes sense, and protect you if it serves the plan. You are a piece, nothing more. And while the sociopath burns the game down in anger, the psychopath rewrites the rules. He changes alliances. He frames people. He installs himself at the top, not through brute force, but by letting others destroy each other while he remains untouched. Machiavelli once wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. The sociopath tries to be feared, but fails. His fear is short-lived. He becomes predictable, exhausting, easy to avoid. People see the tantrum coming, they learn to dodge him, but the psychopath earns fear differently, not through rage, but through unpredictability, through silence, through consequence. You don't know what he's capable of, only that when he moves, the cost is high. That's what makes people obey him. That's why doors open without question. It's not the memory of volume, it's the memory of loss. You must learn this. The one who yells is rarely the one who wins. Risk does not always scream. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it walks into your life dressed as stability. And if you can't tell the difference, if you treat them both as the same kind of threat, you will lower your guard at the exact moment it should be highest. Most people prepare for the firecracker, but they forget about the fuse that burns in silence all the way to the foundation. But there's more. Planning and reaction are not just strategies, they are identities. They shape how these two types move through every corner of life. Their lies, their friendships, their ambitions. In the next part, you'll witness the deeper fracture, how the sociopath survives through chaos and how the psychopath builds an empire through design. Chaos reacts. Strategy endures. That's the dividing line. One moves like a storm, violent, unpredictable, loud. The other moves like a ghost, silent, precise, unseen, until the damage is done. This is the fourth fracture. The sociopath does not plan, he reacts. His world is governed by emotion, by triggers, by the constant need to respond to perceived slights and threats. He's always reacting to disrespect, to fear, to envy, and his reactions are fast, messy, and short-sighted. The psychopath is different. He doesn't react. He designs. He calculates. He plays a long game of deception and control, not because he's cautious, but because he's patient. Machiavelli would say, "He who controls perception controls power." And that's what the psychopath builds, perception, slowly, deliberately, with a plan that moves like a shadow across time. Watch the sociopath in conflict. He escalates, he shouts, he blames. He needs to feel in control, so he seizes it through dominance and intimidation. He wants you to feel his chaos, because if you feel off balance, he feels strong. But that strength is temporary. It burns out quickly. The sociopath can't hold a position. He destroys his alliances, forgets his goals, changes his story depending on the emotion of the moment. One day you're his enemy, the next you're his savior. There's no structure, only waves of reaction. That's why his life is full of broken relationships, failed ventures, and constant drama. He's not building anything, he's just surviving the emotional storm inside himself, day after day, dragging everyone around him into the current. The psychopath doesn't need to survive the storm. He isn't in one. His world is cold, clear, and logical. He studies patterns, learns your routines, and makes decisions based not on emotion, but on outcomes. If he's in conflict, it's not because he's been triggered, it's because he chose it. If he betrays you, it's not out of rage, it's because your trust was a resource and its value expired. That is what makes him terrifying. You can't predict him with emotional logic, because there is none. Every move is part of a larger picture, one you can't see until it's too late. And that picture is always about control. Not chaos, not survival, not pain, control. This is the essence of strategy, and it's why the psychopath often rises quietly through the ranks. You don't see the ambition, you see the charm, you see the competence, you see the calm under pressure. What you don't see is the map in his mind, the plan, the hidden routes through which he gains leverage. He plays weak to draw you in. He plays kind to get your secrets. He plays loyal until you become a liability. Then he discards you, not with drama, but with surgical distance. You don't get closure, you get confusion, and confusion is power, because it keeps you spinning while he walks away clean. The sociopath can't do this. He burns too hot. He turns every conflict into a spectacle. He can't delay gratification. He can't resist the urge to win now. So he self-sabotages. He fights the boss, breaks the rules, punches the wall. He doesn't think long-term. He thinks in bursts. And in a world that rewards discipline and vision, the sociopath falls behind. He may gather followers, other unstable people who feed on chaos, but he never builds an empire. His world collapses under the weight of his own reactions. Machiavelli would warn you here. It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. And the man who can hold a title, who can wear power without needing to flaunt it, is the one to watch. That's the psychopath. He doesn't chase respect through volume. He earns it through control, through patience, through narrative. He lets others speak emotionally while he observes. He lets you win the argument if it keeps him close. He lets you feel like the leader until your position serves his plan better than it serves yours. And when it does, he steps in, quietly, irrevocably. You must see the distinction. One lives in chaos and pulls you into it. The other lives in design and places you exactly where he needs you. Most people can sense the sociopath, but the psychopath remains invisible until the final move. And by then, your name, your story, your future may no longer be your own. That's what planning achieves. It doesn't just win, it reshapes the battlefield. But there's another layer. Planning and chaos don't just affect how they move, they affect where they thrive, how they appear in the world, how they wear the skin of normalcy or tear it off. In the next part, you'll see how one blends into elite circles with terrifying ease, and how the other always ends up setting fire to his own world. The sociopath cannot hide. His chaos is too loud. His eyes give him away. His record follows him. He gets kicked out, banned, exposed, again and again. That's the cost of recklessness. No matter how clever his lies, the heat of his own instability always melts the mask. But the psychopath, he wears the mask so well, people forget it's a mask at all. He's clean-cut, well-dressed, educated, admired. He blends into the highest levels of society, not despite his disorder, but because of it. That's the fifth fracture, social camouflage. The sociopath is a fire you can see. The psychopath is ice beneath your floorboards. And by the time you feel the cold, the structure is already cracking. Understand this. Sociopaths crave attention. They want to be seen, heard, validated. But their emotions betray them. Their rage surfaces in meetings. Their neediness bleeds into conversations. Their obsession leaks into every interaction. That's why they struggle to maintain any position of power for long. Their social mask is thin, easily pierced. They charm at first, but quickly overwhelm. People begin to pull away, and the sociopath responds with more pressure, more need, more chaos. Eventually, he burns the bridge, then blames everyone else for setting the fire. This is why his relationships don't last, why his jobs collapse, why he's always starting over, surrounded by a new cast of enablers who haven't seen the storm yet. The psychopath moves differently. He doesn't crave attention, he craves position, influence, control, and he knows that to acquire those, you must blend in. That's what makes him so effective. He studies the culture he enters. He mirrors its values, speaks its language, adopts its rhythms. In a corporate setting, he's the rising star. In a church, he's the devoted volunteer. In politics, he's the calm, pragmatic voice of reason. Wherever he goes, he becomes what people trust. Because trust is currency, and he knows exactly how to collect it, slowly, quietly, without ever showing the hand behind the smile. This camouflage is not accidental, it's engineered. Every story he tells, every gesture he performs, every silence he holds, it all serves a single purpose, to build a version of himself that disarms suspicion. And it works, because you're not looking for a monster in a suit. You're looking for red flags, anger, cruelty, instability. And when you don't see them, you assume you're safe. But you're not. You're just being handled by someone who's learned to never flash red, only green, only calm, only charm, the perfect disguise. Machiavelli would say, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." The psychopath weaponizes that truth. He builds a mask so perfect, people will defend it even after the truth comes out. They'll say, "No, not him. He was always so polite, so professional, so kind." And that's the final stroke of genius. He doesn't just avoid detection, he builds defenders. People who will protect his image for him, who will discredit the victims, who will paint him as the real target. That's what camouflage does. It creates fog around the predator, while the sociopath's storm reveals him instantly. So where do they end up? The sociopath becomes the cautionary tale, fired, exposed, blocked. His enemies multiply, his world shrinks. He still tries to control, but he does it from the fringes, through intimidation, chaos, threat. He gathers the weak, the angry, the unstable, but power never stays with him for long, because he can't control himself, let alone others. The psychopath, meanwhile, rises, quietly, unopposed, because he's learned to look like a leader, a protector, a provider. He speaks with authority. He makes others feel safe. And when he's finally in position, high enough, untouchable enough, he begins to move pieces you didn't even know were part of the game. You must learn this. Real power does not scream. It does not show its teeth. It does not demand attention. Real power whispers. It smiles. It blends. And that's what makes the psychopath so difficult to detect. You don't see the danger because you're not looking for it in places that seem clean. But the higher you go into politics, corporations, religious institutions, finance, the more likely you are to find him, not as an outsider, but as a pillar, as someone everyone trusts, and that's the moment you're most vulnerable. But there's a question buried under all of this. If one thrives alone and the other gathers followers, what happens when loyalty enters the equation? Who do they trust? Who do they betray? And what does betrayal look like when it comes from someone who never needed you at all? Loyalty is a tool. That's the sixth fracture. A sociopath needs it. A psychopath doesn't. The sociopath surrounds himself with people. Weak men, desperate allies, frightened followers, because he feeds off the illusion of control. He wants a gang, a circle, a crew that fears him, praises him, echoes him. But that loyalty is brittle. It's built on fear, manipulation, and shared chaos. The moment someone challenges him, the whole structure wobbles. The sociopath rules through volatility, not respect. He creates loyalty through intimidation, but what he really builds are time bombs, followers who obey for now, but wait for their chance to turn. That's the kind of loyalty that decays from within, the kind Machiavelli warned rulers never to depend on. The psychopath? He doesn't gather crowds. He doesn't need affirmation. He doesn't seek control over groups. He seeks control over outcomes, one person at a time, quietly, strategically. If he appears loyal, it's because it serves him. If he accepts your loyalty, it's because it's useful. He doesn't demand loyalty, he leverages it. And when it no longer benefits him, he lets it die. No drama, no betrayal speech, just silence, absence. He disappears, and with him, so does your relevance. That's what makes his betrayal so haunting. There are no warning signs, no arguments, just a cold retreat. And the realization that the connection you thought was mutual never really existed. The sociopath's betrayal is emotional. He lashes out, he accuses, he breaks things, then tries to pull you back with rage or guilt. He wants you to feel it, to scream, to cry, because that gives him power. Even when he's ending things, he wants control over the narrative. He wants you to need him, hate him, miss him, because in his world, loyalty is drama. Betrayal is a performance. But the psychopath's betrayal, it's surgical. You only notice it after it's done. You realize you've been replaced, not because he told you, but because he didn't need to. Your access is gone, your influence revoked, and worst of all, you still don't know why. Machiavelli believed that wise rulers must be willing to betray when necessary, but only when it strengthens their position. That is the psychopath's creed. Loyalty is not sacred. It's conditional, functional, and most dangerously of all, one-sided. You may feel loyal to him, but he never needed to feel it back. That imbalance is what keeps him in power. He lets you feel close, lets you believe in the bond, lets you think you're trusted. But every move you make, he watches. Not emotionally, strategically. He's calculating how much you cost and how much you bring in return. And the moment the cost outweighs the value, the decision is made, without regret, without hesitation, without looking back. The sociopath can't do this. His attachments, though unstable, are real. He bonds fast, intensely, often recklessly. He becomes possessive. He confuses loyalty with ownership. And when people leave, he reacts like a wounded animal, viciously, destructively. His betrayal comes from pain. The psychopath's comes from logic. And that's what makes it feel colder, more inhuman. He could look you in the eye, shake your hand, call you brother, and still be planning to cut you loose next week. Because for him, loyalty is not about emotion, it's about efficiency. And if you're no longer efficient, you're gone. So who do they trust? That's the trick. The sociopath trusts no one, but demands loyalty from everyone. The psychopath also trusts no one, but he doesn't demand anything. He simply aligns himself with the useful and discards them when the use fades. He doesn't feel betrayed because he never felt safe, never felt bonded. He's always been alone, even in a room full of allies, even in a home full of praise. And that solitude, that cold independence, is what gives him his edge. The sociopath fears abandonment. The psychopath plans for it. Now ask yourself, how many people around you are loyal because they love you? And how many are loyal because they fear you? Because you offer something? Because they need access to your name, your mind, your resources? This is the Machiavellian lesson. Loyalty must be measured not by words, but by action, by patience, by absence. Because when power shifts, when danger rises, that's when the real alignments are revealed. And in a room where a sociopath screams betrayal, the psychopath simply exits with the prize. But this is only half the equation. Loyalty is internal. But what about external force? What about the way these two use fear? Not just to hold people close, but to keep the world under control. In the next part, you'll see how each weaponizes intimidation and why mistaking their methods may cost you more than just your reputation. Fear is currency, and both know how to spend it. But where the sociopath uses fear like a hammer, loud, messy, immediate, the psychopath wields it like a scalpel, clean, precise, devastating. That's the seventh fracture. Fear and intimidation both command obedience, but through opposite styles. One overwhelms with noise, the other with silence. One shows you the gun, the other never lets you see the bullet. And if you think fear only comes with shouting and threats, you've already misunderstood who truly holds the power in the room. The sociopath is obvious. He uses fear to dominate. Yelling, glaring, threats that come too fast and too often. He controls by keeping people on edge. They walk on eggshells. They anticipate his moods, trying not to trigger another explosion. His intimidation is emotional terrorism, constant volatility. He controls not by logic, but by chaos, because when everyone else is unsure, he feels like the strongest voice. And that works for a while. People obey, people fear him, but only until they get tired, or numb, or find a way out. His fear wears off, it desensitizes, and eventually, people stop reacting, or worse, they turn on him. The psychopath knows better. He doesn't intimidate with volume. He doesn't need to. His fear comes from uncertainty. The silence after a mistake, the lack of reaction, the chilling calm in the face of betrayal. He never threatens. He makes you wonder if he will. And that wondering, the suspense of not knowing what he's capable of, is where real intimidation lives. People are terrified of what they can't predict. And the psychopath ensures he stays unpredictable, not chaotic, controlled, no outbursts, no drama, just a slow tightening of the leash until you realize you're no longer free to move. Machiavelli said it is better to be feared than loved, but only if the fear is maintained without hatred. The sociopath creates both. He scares people, yes, but he also makes them resent him, plot against him, pray for his downfall, because his fear is clumsy, brutal, public. The psychopath avoids that error. He makes people fear disappointment, fear exile, fear silence. They want his approval. They need his presence, because he's conditioned them to believe his favor is a shield. And when it's gone, they feel exposed, alone. That's how you control people without ever raising your voice. And this fear doesn't just shape behavior, it rewrites memory. People around a psychopath start censoring themselves. They stop sharing certain thoughts. They speak with hesitation. They try to be agreeable, until they've forgotten what they actually think. That's the long game of fear. Not obedience through pain, but obedience through invisible conditioning. The sociopath screams at you to sit down. The psychopath designs the room so you never think of standing up. This difference plays out in every environment. In relationships, the sociopath intimidates through jealousy, threats, punishment. The psychopath does it by being irreplaceable, by creating the illusion that your safety, your success, your future depends on him. And if you disappoint him, he doesn't shout, he withdraws, cuts you out, makes you feel cold, small, forgotten. And that absence burns deeper than any insult. It creates fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of insignificance. And those fears last longer than bruises. You must learn to spot it. Not the fear you feel, but the fear you adjust to. The conversations you censor, the truths you hide, the moments when you second-guess yourself before speaking, not because someone threatened you, but because someone trained you. That's the fingerprint of the psychopath, not wounds, behavioral edits. That's how you know he's already inside your mind. And that's what makes him so dangerous in leadership. He doesn't create obedient soldiers, he creates believers. Loyalists, people who will do anything, not because they're afraid of what he'll do to them, but because they're afraid of losing their place beside him. That's the highest form of fear, when people choose to imprison themselves to keep your approval. But what happens when the mask slips? When exposure arrives? When society finally sees them for what they are? What happens when one is punished and the other is promoted? In the next part, you'll understand the most chilling reality of all, that while sociopaths are dragged into the light and destroyed, psychopaths are often rewarded and raised to power. The world punishes chaos, but it rewards control. That's the eighth fracture, and perhaps the most unsettling. When the sociopath is exposed, he's cast out, fired, arrested, abandoned. His violence is too visible, his disorder too raw. People recoil from the damage he causes. Society reacts like a body expelling a toxin, but the psychopath is often promoted, celebrated, imitated, because his damage is hidden behind results, charisma, reputation. He doesn't look like a predator. He looks like a leader, a visionary, a man who gets things done. And that's the mistake. That's the fatal illusion. The sociopath self-destructs. The psychopath ascends. Look closely at the stories we tell about power. We vilify the erratic, the unstable, the openly cruel. But we celebrate the cold-blooded strategist, the ruthless winner. We call him strong, unshakable, focused. He makes hard decisions. He doesn't flinch. We don't ask what it costs to be that way. We don't look behind the curtain, because results blind us, charm distracts us. And when the psychopath delivers money, growth, influence, we stop questioning. We reward him, we place him higher, and with each promotion, his mask becomes harder to remove. The sociopath is easier to contain. His downfall is usually public. People see the warning signs, the shouting matches, the abuse, the spirals. He leaves a trail, and though the damage is real, it eventually reveals him. And once exposed, he burns fast. But the psychopath doesn't leave a trail. He leaves questions, uncertainty, doubt. You may suspect something, but nothing sticks. There are no outbursts, no scenes, just decisions, cold, clean decisions. And in a world obsessed with outcomes, we confuse his lack of emotion for competence. Machiavelli warned rulers not just to wield power, but to appear virtuous while doing so. The psychopath has perfected that balance. He doesn't resist morality, he performs it. Strategic charity, calculated apologies, public humility that costs him nothing, and while others play checkers with their emotions, he plays chess with their perception. That's why society elevates him, because he doesn't look like danger, he looks like discipline, until you realize the people closest to him are sick with stress, confusion, and silent suffering, but by then he's already moved on. Higher, untouchable. Think of who rises in politics, who survives in corporate war zones, who becomes the head of institutions that crush dissent and reward obedience. It's not always the loud tyrant, it's often the smiling tactician, the one who never panics, never reacts, never breaks. That's the man people trust when everything is burning, because they think his calm means wisdom. But sometimes it means emptiness, and that emptiness allows him to make choices others couldn't stomach. Layoffs, betrayals, cover-ups, all justified, all necessary, all cloaked in rational language. That's how evil survives, not with horns, but with spreadsheets. Meanwhile, the sociopath is thrown to the wolves, not because he's worse, but because he can't hide. He burns bridges on camera, he threatens the wrong people, he collapses under the weight of his own need for control. He's exposed as a liability. The psychopath avoids that fate because he knows how to manage perception. He surrounds himself with useful allies, disposable scapegoats, and people too afraid or too enchanted to challenge him. And if they do, he doesn't retaliate publicly. He rewrites the narrative, quietly, efficiently, until they're gone, and the world still sees him as the hero. So what does this mean for you? It means the real danger isn't always the one screaming in your face. It might be the one shaking your hand. It might be the one everyone praises, the one you've trusted with your secrets, your future, your loyalty. And if you don't know how to read beyond reputation, beyond charisma, beyond outcomes, you'll never see him coming. Because society is built to protect his kind, to confuse stillness with goodness, to confuse silence with honor, and the psychopath exploits that perfectly. But what if we stopped thinking in theory? What if we looked at the actual faces of history? Rulers, killers, legends, leaders, and decoded who was which. In the next part, we go into the blood-soaked annals of history. Real names, real power, real masks. You will finally see the blueprint of both the tyrant and the tactician. History remembers names, but it forgets the masks they wore. That's the ninth fracture, the archetypes. The living, breathing examples of both sociopaths and psychopaths who walked the world as kings, criminals, saviors, and monsters. Their faces changed, their stories were rewritten. But if you know how to read beneath the legend, the pattern is clear. The sociopath leaves behind ashes and headlines. The psychopath leaves behind empires and myths. And if you don't learn to separate the two, you'll mistake chaos for brilliance and brilliance for virtue. Begin with the sociopaths, men like Pablo Escobar, emotionally volatile, obsessed with loyalty, capable of both terrifying cruelty and sudden, tearful generosity. He gave food to the poor and bombs to the city on the same day. His rage controlled him, his paranoia consumed him. He built an empire through fear, but couldn't sustain it. He trusted too easily, betrayed too quickly, reacted without thinking, and when the world came for him, he faced it like he faced everything else alone, enraged, reckless. That's the sociopath's downfall. He doesn't just burn others, he burns himself. Now contrast that with someone like Vladimir Putin. Cold, calculating, emotionless, every move deliberate, every alliance transactional. He doesn't explode, he waits, he studies, he infiltrates. His face rarely changes, his words are measured, and behind that calm is a mind untouched by guilt or panic. He doesn't just conquer land, he conquers perception. He understands that modern warfare is not just fought with weapons, but with narratives. That's a psychopath. A man who doesn't need to yell to be feared, who can devastate countries and still walk into meetings smiling. And the world, terrified of what silence means, gives him space. The sociopath rises through chaos, but never keeps the throne. Napoleon Bonaparte, brilliant, passionate, reckless. He turned Europe upside down, not through strategy alone, but through sheer will. But he trusted emotion, let his pride drive him into disaster, burned through armies and alliances alike. His vision was grand, but it lacked restraint, and restraint is the one thing a sociopath can never maintain. He becomes addicted to momentum, until the very thing that made him rise, his force, becomes the reason he falls. Then there are those like Joseph Stalin, a man who built systems of fear so efficient people erased their own families from memory to survive. He didn't rant, he didn't scream in the streets, he simply made people disappear. He rewrote history books while he was still alive. That's the psychopath's talent, to alter reality, not through emotion, but through infrastructure. His power didn't come from outbursts, it came from institutionalized paranoia. His fear spread like fog, invisible but choking. People didn't even speak his name in private, because with the true psychopath, fear doesn't end when the man leaves the room, it follows you home. Even in modern culture, you see the split. The sociopath becomes the aggressive CEO who breaks under pressure, lashes out at staff, tanks the company. The psychopath becomes the founder who cuts 20,000 jobs without blinking and doubles stock value. One is feared for his instability, the other is praised for his tough decisions. Both inflict damage, but one is punished, the other is rewarded. That's the brutal truth of power. The world favors the man who can keep his mask on longest, even if the soul behind it is hollow. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He didn't glorify virtue, he exposed its limits. He knew that in the real world, the man who appears moral while remaining utterly detached would always triumph over the man who feels too much. And that's what separates these historical archetypes. The sociopath collapses because he's ruled by his emotions. The psychopath rules because he has none. The first creates revolutions, the second creates regimes. But don't let this turn into a history lesson. This is not about trivia, it's about detection, application. You must start reading people like you read power. Not by how they make you feel, but by how they move, by what they do when no one's watching. by how many versions of themselves exist in different rooms, because that's where the truth lives, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows behind it. So now you've seen the faces, felt the pattern, understood the silence. But the final lesson still waits. It's not about traits, it's not about history, it's about you. Why this knowledge could be the only thing keeping you from ruin. Why knowing the difference is no longer optional, but essential. In the final part, you'll receive the last warning. The one Machiavelli would whisper only to those wise enough to survive. This is the final fracture. The last warning. And it's not about them, it's about you. The psychopath and the sociopath aren't just personalities in books, case studies, or news stories. They walk among us, they speak like us, they work beside us, and some of them sit across from you at dinner. The cost of misunderstanding them is not theoretical, it is personal, it is survival. Because if you can't tell who is empty and who is unstable, you will lose. Your trust will be used. Your love will be leveraged. Your mind will be rewritten. Machiavelli would say, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. The same is true for you, who surrounds you, and more importantly, who's hiding in plain sight. The most dangerous mistake people make is thinking they would know that they could sense evil, feel darkness, spot a predator. But the psychopath relies on that illusion. He builds his mask around your expectations. You think danger looks like anger, threats, raised voices. But the real threat? It comes with stillness, with eye contact, with gentle tones and well-placed silence. The sociopath may rattle the room, but the psychopath builds it around you, brick by brick, until you forget there was ever a way out. That is the nature of true manipulation. Not destruction through fear, but redesign through trust. You have already met one. That's the truth no one wants to say. You've already given your time, your secrets, your loyalty to someone who never felt a thing for you. And maybe, even now, a part of you still defends them. That's how effective they are. They don't just deceive you, they make you deceive yourself. They train your guilt to protect them, your fear to obey them. And when you finally wake up, if you wake up, it feels like a collapse. Not because they changed, but because you finally saw, and once you see, you can't unsee. So here is your final clarity. The sociopath will hurt you loudly. You'll know it, you'll feel it. It will come in waves: abuse, apology, rage, regret. And that's a storm you can prepare for, escape from, survive. But the psychopath? He leaves no fingerprints. He walks away with your trust, your reputation, your peace, and you'll blame yourself. You'll say, I should have known, I should have seen it, but how could you? He never raised his voice, never showed his hand. That's why he wins. Not by force, but by patience, by control, by letting you write the story while he writes the ending. And now that you know this, what will you do? Will you start reading people more closely? Watching not just what they say, but what they don't say? Will you re-examine the relationships you've trusted too easily? The charisma you've mistaken for kindness? Because this isn't just about avoiding harm, it's about claiming sovereignty, about refusing to be a pawn in someone else's quiet war for control. This knowledge is not paranoia, it's protection. And in a world that elevates masks and punishes truth, the ability to see through illusion is the highest form of power. Machiavelli would tell you that peace is built through fear, not love. That virtue is less important than appearing virtuous. But you have a choice. You can wield this knowledge as armor or as a weapon. You can use it to defend your peace or to manipulate others. The difference lies in your intention, in your conscience, if you still have one. And perhaps that's the final distinction of all. Not between them, but between you and them. Because now you see what they are. Now you understand what they do. Now you know how they win. So the only question left is, what will you become? If you've made it this far, it's because a part of you already knows this truth. The most dangerous predator is not the one who declares himself, but the one who hides in plain sight. A psychopath and a sociopath are both wolves, but they wear different skins, and failing to tell them apart will cost you dearly. Now tell me in the comments, are you ready to see the mask for what it is? Are you willing to accept that charm itself can be a weapon? If this message touched you, if it made sense, write in the comments, I see the wolf. Let's see how many here are truly ready to face the truth Machiavelli warned us about. And don't forget, keep watching the next video. It's important, much more than you imagine. See you there.